What if the one person you trusted most, who shared your blood and your heart, turned their back on you for a fortune worth $100 million? Picture this: a sweltering Charleston morning, the air thick with grief, and a coffin barely cold. Then, a voice sharp, venomous, dripping with betrayal cuts through the silence, demanding everything you fought to protect. My name is Henry Whitaker, and I stood at my son's funeral, watching his ex-wife, a woman who abandoned him when he was dying, claw for his legacy with a smirk that could shatter glass. How far would you go when someone tries to steal not just your money, but your son's memory? Buckle up, because this tale of greed, lies, and gut-wrenching betrayal will leave you questioning who you can ever trust. Welcome to Revenge X, where electrifying stories of betrayal and triumph set your soul ablaze. We're thrilled to have you join our community of viewers who celebrate unyielding resilience and fierce courage. Hit that subscribe button to never miss a heart-pounding tale. And it'd be incredible if you smashed the like button, shared this video, or dropped a comment with the time and city or country you're watching from. Your likes, shares, and heartfelt comments are the greatest spiritual gift, the fuel that keeps this channel burning bright. Now, buckle up for a story that'll hit you right in the feels. Let's dive in. My name is Henry Whitaker, a 72-year-old widower from Charleston, South Carolina, who built a real estate empire from nothing but grit and a stubborn refusal to quit. I've lived through market crashes, family feuds, and the slow fade of my beloved son, James, who fought cancer for a decade before it claimed him last month. My life has been a ledger of hard-won victories and quiet losses, but nothing prepared me for the betrayal that unfolded at his funeral, where the air was thick with grief and the scent of lilies hadn't yet faded. That day, my son's ex-wife, Cassie Monroe, who walked out on him 15 years ago, strutted into the chapel with a venomous smirk, demanding $100 million of his estate money she had no right to touch. The audacity of her claim, the raw nerve of her presence, didn't just wound me. It tore open every scar I'd carried since James's diagnosis, igniting a fury that burned hotter than the Charleston sun. The chapel was packed that humid September morning, the pews filled with James's friends, colleagues, and our loyal family accountant, Margaret Maggie Ellis, who'd stood by us through every hospital bill and late-night crisis. Maggie, with her sharp eyes and sharper wit, was the kind of woman who could spot a lie before it left someone's mouth. Across the aisle sat Danny Hargrove, a slick real estate rival who'd always envied James's success and had wormed his way into this funeral, no doubt sniffing for scraps. Then there was Sarah Tate, a neutral acquaintance from the local Chamber of Commerce, who hovered between sympathy and curiosity, her presence a reminder of the town's gossip mill. But it was Cassie who stole the air from the room when she pushed through the oak doors of St. Michael's Church, her 5-inch heels clicking like gunfire on the polished floor. She wore a black designer dress that screamed money, her lips curled in a rehearsed half-smile, and her eyes glinted with the confidence of a predator who thought she'd already won. "I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine," she announced, her voice cutting through the hymn's fading notes like a blade. "As James's lawful wife, I'm entitled to his $100 million estate." The words hit me like a physical blow, my chest tightening so hard I thought my ribs might crack. $100 million, James's legacy, built from his tech startup and real estate ventures, now reduced to a prize for a woman who'd abandoned him when he needed her most. The room gasped, heads swiveling, whispers erupting like wildfire. Maggie gripped my arm, her fingers steadying me as my vision blurred. Danny leaned forward in his pew, his smirk barely hidden, no doubt delighting in the chaos. Sarah's pen froze over her notebook, her eyes wide with shock. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My gaze locked on James's mahogany coffin, its brass plate gleaming under the candlelight. He wasn't even in the ground yet, and she was clawing at his memory like a vulture. 15 years ago, Cassie walked out on James without a word, leaving him with nothing but a stack of medical bills and a broken heart. She didn't show up for his first chemo session, didn't call when he was too weak to stand, didn't even send a card when he was hospitalized for months. I was there for every moment, holding his hand through the nausea, driving him to appointments in the dead of night, reading him old detective novels when the pain kept him awake. Now, here she was, claiming a fortune she'd never earned, a life she'd never lived. My hands trembled, not from grief, but from a rage so deep it felt like it could burn the church to ash. I wanted to scream, to tear her apart right there in front of the altar. But something colder, sharper took hold, a resolve forged in years of watching my son fight and lose. I pressed my palm against my suit jacket, forcing it to still, and kept my eyes on the coffin. Cassie's lawyer, a twitchy young man named Ethan Wells, fumbled with a red folder, stammering about marital rights and survivor clauses. His voice cracked, betraying his inexperience. And I knew instantly he hadn't read the divorce papers Cassie signed all those years ago, papers that stripped her of any claim to James's wealth. Maggie, ever the loyal shadow, leaned toward me, her whisper fierce. "She's got nothing, Henry. We've got the proof." Her confidence anchored me. But the whispers around us grew louder, more vicious. "How dare she show up?" someone muttered. "Poor Henry," another said, their pity stinging worse than the betrayal itself. Danny, the snake, caught my eye and offered a mock nod of sympathy, his lips twitching with amusement. Sarah scribbled furiously, no doubt already drafting her gossip column. The room was a minefield of judgment, and I was caught in the crossfire, grief, fury, and betrayal twisting inside me like a storm. Then came the first shock. A woman I barely recognized, Ellen Carver, a nurse who'd cared for James in his final months, stood up from the back row and shouted, "She never visited him, not once." Her voice trembled with outrage, and the room fell silent, all eyes on Cassie. Ellen's outburst wasn't planned, she was a stranger to me, but her loyalty to James was undeniable. Cassie's smirk faltered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly, tossing her hair and doubling down. "I was his wife," she snapped. "I loved him. You can't erase that." Her words were a lie so blatant it felt like a slap, and the second shock hit. Danny stood, his voice oily and calculated, and said, "Cassie's got a point. Legal teas don't just vanish." His betrayal cut deeper than I expected. He'd been James's rival, but I hadn't realized he'd side with her, likely hoping to profit from the chaos. The third shock came from Sarah, who, instead of staying neutral, turned to me with a hesitant frown and said, "Henry, there's a rumor Cassie's been meeting with investors, claiming she co-founded James's startup." The accusation landed like a grenade, exploding the last of my restraint. Cassie hadn't just come for the money, she was rewriting James's entire legacy, claiming credit for a company she'd mocked when he started it. My heart pounded, my vision narrowing to a pinpoint. I wanted to lunge at her, to demand how she dared defile my son's memory, but Maggie's hand tightened on my arm, grounding me. "Not here," she whispered. "Not like this." Inside, I was a battlefield. Grief screamed for me to mourn quietly, to honor James with dignity. Fury demanded I expose Cassie's lies, drag her through the mud she'd created. Betrayal 5 times worse than anything I'd felt before clawed at my chest, whispering that I'd failed James by letting her get this far. How could I stand there, silent, while she twisted his life into her story? How could I let Danny's greed and Sarah's indecision fuel this circus? But I remembered James's words from a hospital bed, weak but clear. "Dad, don't let her win. Protect what we built." That memory was my anchor, my blade, my shield. I turned to Cassie, my voice low but lethal. "You're no wife. You're nothing to him. Not anymore." The room froze. Cassie's eyes widened, her lawyer stammered, and even Danny's smirk vanished. Maggie pulled a folder from her bag, the divorce decree, stamped and notarized, a weapon of truth. I didn't need to say more. The silence that followed was louder than any scream, heavier than the coffin at the altar. Cassie stood there, exposed, her heels clicking faintly as she shifted, searching for an ally who wouldn't come. I didn't feel triumph, only a hollow resolve. This was just the beginning, a war not just for money, but for my son's name, his legacy, his truth, and I'd fight it with every breath I had left. The chapel doors swung shut behind Cassie, her heels echoing like a fading war drum, but the silence she left behind was a lie. It wasn't peace, it was the kind of quiet that hums before a hurricane rips through everything you've built. I stood frozen by James's coffin, the weight of her words, $100 million, my son's blood and sweat still burning in my ears. My chest felt like it was caving in, not from grief alone, but from the raw, jagged betrayal of a woman who'd spit on his memory and called it love. Maggie, my rock, leaned closer, her voice a low growl. "She's playing dirty, Henry. We need to move fast." Her words snapped me back, but inside, I was drowning in a war between rage and restraint. A father's heart screaming to protect what was left of his son. Outside, the Charleston heat pressed down, thick and unforgiving, as mourners spilled onto the church steps, their whispers buzzing like flies. I caught Danny Hargrove's eye. He was already on his phone, no doubt texting his cronies about the spectacle, his grin sharp enough to cut glass. Sarah Tate lingered nearby, her notepad clutched tight, her face torn between sympathy and the itch to chase a headline. Then came the first shock. A new voice cut through the crowd, Tommy Reed, James's old high school buddy, now a mechanic with a heart bigger than his paycheck. That woman's a damn liar, he bellowed, his southern drawl thick with fury. She never gave a shit about James when he was coughing up his lungs. Heads turned, and I felt a flicker of gratitude for Tommy's loyalty, but it was short-lived. Cassie, who'd been lingering by her sleek black Mercedes, spun around, her eyes blazing. "You think you know me, old man?" She spat, her voice dripping with street venom, the kind you hear in Charleston's dive bars at midnight. "Henry, you're just a greedy bastard hoarding what should have been mine. James was my husband, not your damn puppet." Her words were a Molotov cocktail, igniting the crowd's murmurs into a roar. My blood boiled, but worse was the second shock. Danny stepped forward, egging her on. "She's got a point, Whitaker," he sneered, his polished suit a mockery of his intentions. "You've been milking James's empire for years. Maybe it's time to share." His betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a calculated stab, a rival smelling blood and angling for a cut of the chaos. The third shock hit like a freight train. Sarah, who I'd thought was neutral, pulled me aside, her voice low and shaky. "Henry, I heard Cassie's been meeting with a shady lawyer from Atlanta, claiming she's got a secret will James signed before he died." My stomach dropped. A secret will? The idea was absurd, but the audacity of it, the sheer gall of Cassie forging documents to steal James's legacy, lit a fire in my gut. My mind raced, replaying every hospital night, every moment I'd held James's hand as he fought to breathe. Had I missed something? Had he been coerced in his final days? Too weak to resist? The doubt gnawed at me, a traitor in my own head, whispering that maybe I hadn't protected him enough. Maybe I'd failed him after all. Inside, I was a mess of jagged edges. Fury screamed for me to drag Cassie through the mud, to expose her lies to every soul in Charleston. Grief begged me to collapse, to mourn my son without this circus of greed. Betrayal 5 times heavier than anything I'd ever felt clawed at my soul, whispering that Cassie wasn't just stealing money. She was stealing James's truth, his dignity, everything I'd fought to preserve. But Tommy's voice broke through, steady and fierce. "Henry, don't let that snake twist his story. James trusted you. We all did." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. I nodded, my jaw tight, and turned to Maggie. "Get the car," I said, my voice low but steady. "We're not done here." We drove to Maggie's office downtown, a cramped space above a coffee shop that smelled of espresso and old books. The ride was silent, but my mind was a war zone. Every bump in the road jolted memories of James, his laugh when we'd grill ribs in the backyard, his stubborn pride when he launched his startup, the way his eyes dimmed in the hospital but never lost their fight. Cassie's claim wasn't just about money. It was an assault on those memories, a theft of the man he'd been. Maggie slid a manila envelope across the table, her hands steady but her eyes fierce. "This is James's will," she said. "Signed 6 months ago, notarized, airtight. He left everything to you, every cent, every property, every share. Cassie's got no claim, but she's not going to stop." Then came another shock. Maggie pulled out a USB drive, her expression grim. "James recorded something before he passed. Said it was for you, in case she pulled something like this." My heart stuttered. A recording? I hadn't known. The idea that James had foreseen this betrayal, had prepared for it even as he was dying, hit me like a punch. My hands shook as I took the drive, the weight of it heavier than the $100 million Cassie was chasing. "Play it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The screen flickered to life, and there was James, sitting in his home office, surrounded by books and the aloe plant I'd given him years ago. His face was gaunt, but his eyes were clear, resolute. "Dad," he said, his voice steady despite the rasp. "If Cassie comes back, don't let her fool you. She left me when I was nothing but bills and pain. You were there always. This empire, it's yours to protect. Don't let her take it." Tears burned my eyes, not from sadness, but from the fierce pride of knowing my son had trusted me, even at the end. But the pain was there too, sharp and unrelenting, because Cassie's lies were trying to erase him all over again. Before I could process it, another shock. A knock at the door. It was Ellen, the nurse from the funeral, her face flushed with urgency. "Henry, I found something," she said, handing me a crumpled note. "It's from James's hospital chart. Cassie called the ward a week before he died, asking about his estate, not his health." The betrayal deepened, a knife twisting in my gut. She hadn't even cared if he was alive, only what he was worth. My hands clenched, the note crumpling further. Maggie's eyes narrowed. "That's evidence," she said. "We'll use it." But the final shock came from Danny, who'd followed us to the office, his face smug as he leaned against the doorframe. "You're fighting a losing battle, old man," he taunted, his voice pure low-country slime. Cassie's got friends in high places. You think your little papers will stop her? His words were a match to gasoline. And for a moment, I saw red, my hands itching to wipe that smirk off his face. But Maggie stepped between us, her voice ice cold. Get out, Hargrove, or I'll have you cited for harassment. He laughed, but he left, his parting shot lingering like poison. This ain't over, Whitaker. And I sat back, my heart pounding, my mind a storm of betrayal and resolve. Cassie's lies, Danny's greed, even Sarah's wavering neutrality, they were all vultures circling James's legacy. But I wasn't just a grieving father, I was a fighter, forged in decades of battles harder than this. I looked at Maggie, at Ellen, at the USB drive in my hand. She wants a war, I said, my voice steady as steel. Let's give her one. The room went quiet, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the calm before I burned her lies to the ground. The office door clicked shut behind Danny's slimy exit, leaving a silence that felt like the air before a lightning strike. My heart was still pounding from James's video, his voice echoing in my skull, a beacon of trust in a sea of betrayal. Maggie's office, with its creaky floorboards and coffee-stained desk, felt like a bunker now, a place to plan a counterstrike against Cassie's venomous lies. I clutched the USB drive, its weight a reminder of my son's foresight, his faith in me. But the betrayal 5 times sharper than anything I'd ever felt gnawed at my bones. Cassie wasn't just after $100 million. She was rewriting James's life, painting herself as the victim while I, the father who never left, was cast as the villain. My mind churned, torn between the urge to scream and the need to stay sharp, to protect what James had died for. Maggie slid a legal pad across the desk, her pen tapping rhythmically. We've got the will, the divorce papers, and now this video, she said, her voice steady but fierce. But Cassie's not stopping, Henry. She's got the whole town whispering. Her words stung, not because they were new, but because they were true. Charleston's gossip mill was already spinning, and I could feel the eyes of old neighbors, business partners, even strangers, judging me from afar. Then came the first shock. Tommy Reed burst through the door, his flannel shirt damp with sweat, his face red with rage. Henry, you won't believe this shit, he growled, tossing a crumpled flyer onto the desk. It was a mock obituary, printed cheap and distributed at a local bar, claiming Cassie was James's devoted widow and accusing me of stealing his fortune. The audacity hit like a brick, and my hands shook as I read her lies in black and white. You think you can bury me, you old prick? Cassie's voice rang out, and I spun to see her leaning against the doorframe, uninvited, her eyes glinting with street-smart malice. I'm the one who loved him, not you, sitting on his cash like a greedy hog. Her words were pure low-country venom, the kind of taunt you'd hear in a back-alley brawl, and they cut deeper than I expected. The room froze, Maggie's pen halting midair, Tommy's fists clenching. But the second shock was worse. Sarah Tate, who'd followed Cassie in, hesitated before speaking, her voice shaky. Henry, I found emails Cassie's been pitching herself to James's investors as his silent partner, saying she inspired his startup. My heart sank. Silent partner? Cassie had laughed when James sketched his first app on a napkin, calling it a pipe dream. Now she was claiming his genius as her own, a betrayal so vile it felt like she was spitting on his grave. The third shock came like a gut punch. Ellen Carver, the nurse who'd stood up for James at the funeral, pulled out her phone, her hands trembling. Henry, I just got this from a colleague at the hospital, she said, her voice cracking. It was a voicemail from Cassie, left 2 weeks before James died, demanding access to his medical records, not to check on his health, but to confirm his mental capacity for estate changes. The betrayal wasn't just personal now. It was clinical, calculated, a scheme to paint James as too weak to make his own choices. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a rage so fierce it felt like my blood was boiling. I wanted to storm out, find Cassie, and tear her lies apart with my bare hands. But inside, I was fracturing. Had I missed signs of her scheming while I was wiping James's brow, counting his breaths? Had I been too focused on his pain to see her plotting? The doubt was a traitor, whispering that I'd failed him, that I'd let this snake slither back into his story. Tommy's voice broke through, rough but steady. Henry, she's a damn leech, but you're stronger than this. James knew it. His loyalty was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. Ellen nodded, her eyes fierce with conviction. I saw you with him, Henry. Every night, every fight, she wasn't there. You were. Their words anchored me, but the pain of Cassie's betrayal, amplified fivefold by her public lies, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for James's truth, his memory, every moment we'd shared. Maggie, ever the strategist, opened her laptop. "We're going to the courthouse," she said. "Emergency probate filing. We'll lock her out before she can spin another lie." The drive to the Charleston County Courthouse was a blur, the palmetto trees lining the road a green haze against my churning thoughts. My mind was a battlefield, grief for James, fury at Cassie, and a gnawing fear that her lies might outrun the truth. What if the town believed her? What if they saw me as the greedy father she painted, hoarding $100 million while she played the grieving widow? The thought was unbearable. A betrayal of every sacrifice I'd made for James, every sleepless night, every dollar I'd poured into his care, every tear I'd hidden to keep him strong. Maggie glanced at me, her voice soft but firm. "You're not alone in this, Henry. We've got evidence. We've got James's voice." End of trapped. At the courthouse, we met Judge Clara Hensley, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for cutting through bullshit. Maggie handed over the will, the divorce papers, and a copy of James's video, her hands steady as steel. But then came another shock. Danny Hargrove was already there, lurking in the hallway, whispering to a clerk. "You're wasting your time, Whitaker," he sneered, his voice dripping with Charleston's backstreet swagger. "Cassie's got dirt on you old deals, shady loans. You're done." His words were a blade, hinting at lies he'd concocted to smear my name, to make me look like the crook. My fists clenched, my heart screaming to shut him up, but Maggie's hand on my shoulder stopped me. "He's baiting you," she whispered. "Let the truth do the talking." The final shock came as we left the courthouse. Sarah, who'd been trailing us, slipped me a note. "Henry, I'm sorry," it read. "Cassie paid a blogger to spread that obituary flyer. I didn't know." Her betrayal, though softer, stung just as deep. She'd known about Cassie's schemes and stayed silent, her neutrality a quiet complicity. My chest tightened, the weight of so many betrayals. Cassie's lies, Danny's greed, Sarah's cowardice, threatening to crush me. But I remembered James's voice on that video, clear and unwavering. "Protect what we built." I straightened, my resolve hardening like the oak trees outside. Maggie, Tommy, and Ellen were my army, their loyalty a shield against the vultures circling James's legacy. As we stepped into the evening air, the courthouse's shadow loomed behind us. Cassie's lies were spreading, but I wasn't the broken father she expected. I was Henry Whitaker, a man who'd built an empire and buried a son, and I'd be damned if I let her steal his name. "She wants to play dirty," I said, my voice low and lethal. "Let's bury her with the truth." Maggie nodded, her eyes glinting with fire. The war was on, and I'd fight it with every ounce of strength I had left for James, for his legacy, for the truth that burned brighter than any lie. The courthouse steps faded behind us, but the weight of Cassie's lies clung to me like Charleston's humid air, thick and suffocating. My resolve was iron, forged by James's voice on that video, but my heart was a battlefield, grief, rage, and betrayal warring so fiercely I could barely breathe. Maggie drove us back to her office, her knuckles white on the wheel, while Tommy and Ellen followed in silence, their loyalty a quiet anchor in the storm. Cassie's fake obituary, her forged claims, Danny's taunts, and Sarah's half-hearted betrayal had turned my son's memory into a circus, and I was done playing defense. $100 million wasn't just money, it was James's legacy, his sweat, his dreams, and I'd burn the world down before I let her steal it. But the fight was about to get uglier, and the betrayals were about to cut deeper than I could have imagined. Back at Maggie's office, the air smelled of stale coffee and determination. She slammed a stack of papers on the desk. James's estate inventory, every asset listed, beachfront properties, tech shares, a yacht he'd barely used. "We've got the law on our side," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "But Cassie's playing to the crowd now. We need to go public, Henry." Hard and fast, her words lit a spark. But before I could respond, the first shock hit like a sledgehammer. Tommy's phone buzzed, and he cursed under his breath, showing us a social media post from Cassie. It was a grainy photo of her and James from 20 years ago, her arm around him captioned, "They stole my love, my life, my everything. I'll fight for what's mine." The comments were a cesspool strangers, calling me a money-grubbing bastard, accusing me of bullying a grieving widow. My chest tightened, the betrayal 5 times heavier than before, as if she'd taken a knife to James's memory and twisted it for likes. "You're just a washed-up old fool, Whitaker." Cassie's voice screeched through the open window, and I turned to see her on the sidewalk below, a megaphone in hand, surrounded by a small crowd of gawkers. "You think you can wipe me out? I'm the queen of this story, and you're just the dirt under my heels. Her street-sharp taunts, laced with low-country venom, hit like a punch, drawing a ding crowd roared, some cheering her on, their voices a chorus of ignorance. The second shock landed like a bomb. Among the crowd was Pastor John Grayson, a respected local preacher who'd baptized James as a boy. He stepped forward, his face grim, and shouted, "Cassie's telling the truth. Henry's been fleecing this town for years. His betrayal was a gut punch. John had prayed with me during James's chemo, shared beers on my porch, and now he was siding with her, swayed by her lies or maybe Danny's dirty money." My knees buckled, the sting of his defection cutting deeper than Cassie's theatrics, as if the community I'd built my life around was turning against me. Inside, I was unraveling. The accusations, greedy, manipulative, heartless, echoed in my head, each one a fresh wound. Had I been too hard, too focused on James's empire to see the town's resentment? Had I failed him by letting these lies fester? The doubt was a poison, seeping into every memory of late-night hospital vigils, of James's weak smile when I brought him his favorite shrimp po' boy. I wanted to scream, to storm outside and shut Cassie up, but Maggie's hand on my shoulder was a steadying force. "She's desperate," she whispered. "This is her last play." But the third shock was already barreling in. Ellen, her face pale, handed me a letter she'd found slipped under her car's wiper. It was from Danny, handwritten and vicious. "Back off, Whitaker, or I'll leak proof you bribed city officials for those land deals." The accusation was a lie, but its specificity naming dates, projects made my blood run cold. Was he bluffing, or had he dug up something real? The fear gripped me, a traitor in my own mind, whispering that my past wasn't as clean as I'd convinced myself. The crowd outside grew louder, Cassie's megaphone blaring. "Henry Whitaker's a thief. He's robbing me blind." Her words were a street brawl, raw and brutal, and the crowd ate it up, some throwing insults my way. I felt the weight of their judgment, the town I'd poured my life into now spitting on my name. Tommy slammed his fist on the desk, his voice a growl. "She's turning this into a damn reality show, Henry. We gotta hit back harder." Ellen nodded, her eyes blazing with the same fire that had driven her to speak at the funeral. "James deserved better than this," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "You're his father. You're his truth." Their words were a lifeline, but the betrayal, Cassie's lies, John's turncoat sermon, Danny's threats felt like a noose tightening around my heart. I wasn't just fighting for James's legacy. I was fighting for my own identity, for the man who'd stayed by his son when no one else did. Maggie's plan was bold. A public event at the Battery, Charleston's historic waterfront, to unveil the James Whitaker Foundation for Literacy and Tech Education. "We'll tell his story," she said, with his words, his proof, his heart. But before we could finalize it, another shock hit. Sarah Tate, her face flushed with guilt, burst into the office, clutching a laptop. "Henry, Cassie's team just filed a motion to freeze the estate," she stammered. "They're claiming you coerced James into changing his will under duress." The audacity was staggering. Cassie was now accusing me of manipulating my dying son. A lie so vile it felt like she'd dug up his body and danced on it. My vision blurred, rage and grief colliding in a storm that threatened to break me. Had I been too protective, too controlling in those final months? The doubt was a blade, slicing through my certainty. But James's video flashed in my mind, his clear, steady voice choosing me. Then came the final shock. A courier arrived, delivering a package from an anonymous source. Inside was a flash drive labeled Cassie's Secrets. Tommy plugged it in, and we heard a recording of Cassie and Danny, their voices low and conspiratorial, plotting to take Whitaker down by forging a second will and paying off local influencers like Pastor John. My heart stopped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a conspiracy, a calculated war to steal James's legacy and ruin me. Maggie's eyes narrowed, her voice steel. "This is our weapon, Henry. We use this, and she's done." Ellen's hands shook, tears in her eyes. "She laughed while James was dying," she whispered. She laughed. I stood, my cane tapping the floor, my resolve hardening like the Battery's ancient seawall. Cassie's lies, John's betrayal, Danny's schemes, they were vultures. But I was no prey. My son's voice, his trust, his legacy burned brighter than their greed. "Set up the event," I told Maggie, my voice low but lethal. "We're not just fighting back, we're ending this." The air in the room shifted, charged with purpose. Outside, Cassie's crowd was still chanting, but I wasn't afraid. I was Henry Whitaker, and I'd bury their lies with the truth, one devastating blow at a time. The flash drive labeled Cassie's Secrets sat on Maggie's desk like a loaded gun, its contents a ticking bomb, ready to blow Cassie's lies sky high. My heart pounded with a mix of fury and grim satisfaction, but the betrayal, 5 times heavier than any wound I'd ever carried, clawed at my soul. Cassie's conspiracy with Danny, her paid-off preacher, her forged will, it wasn't just about $100 million anymore. It was a war to erase James's life, to paint me as a monster while she played the martyr. My hands gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles white, as I fought the urge to storm out and confront her in the street. Inside, I was a storm of grief and rage, torn between the father who wanted to mourn and the warrior who needed to fight. Maggie's eyes met mine, fierce and unwavering. "The Battery event is our stage, Henry. We'll bury her with this." The next morning, Charleston's air was thick with salt and tension, the Battery's palmetto-lined promenade buzzing with preparations for the James Whitaker Foundation launch. Tommy was setting up chairs, his calloused hands moving with purpose, while Ellen coordinated with volunteers, her face set with a quiet fury that mirrored my own. But the first shock hit before we could even start. A local news van pulled up, and out stepped Cassie, flanked by a camera crew and a new face, Lila Brooks, a slick PR agent known for spinning scandals into sob stories. Cassie's voice boomed through a microphone, raw and street sharp. "Henry Whitaker's a lying old crook, hogging my man's fortune while I'm out here fighting for scraps." Her words were a Charleston alley taunt, venomous and loud, and the crowd, locals, tourists, even some of James's old clients ate it up, their cheers, a knife in my chest. The betrayal stung deeper than ever, her lies turning my town against me. Then came the second shock. Lila stepped forward, her smile as fake as her designer purse, and handed out glossy pamphlets claiming Cassie was launching a rival foundation in James's name, funded by his true wishes. My blood ran cold. A rival foundation? She was stealing not just his money, but his vision, his dream of literacy and tech for kids who had nothing. My mind spiraled, replaying every moment I'd sat with James, planning this foundation as he lay in a hospital bed, his voice weak but clear. "Dad, make it real. Make it ours." Had I missed something? Had I been so focused on his pain that I'd let her slither into his legacy? The doubt was a poison, seeping into my bones, whispering that I'd failed him by letting her get this far. The third shock was a gut punch. Sarah Tate, who I'd hoped was coming around, approached me with a trembling lip. "Henry, I found something," she whispered, handing me a leaked email from Danny to a city council member, hinting that I'd strong-armed James into cutting Cassie out of the will during his final days. The email was a lie, but its precision naming dates, hospital visits made my heart stutter. Was this why the town was turning? Did they believe I'd manipulated my own son? The betrayal wasn't just Cassie's now. It was Danny's, Lila's, even Sarah's, for hesitating to warn me sooner. My chest ached, not just with rage, but with a grief so deep it felt like losing James all over again. I wanted to scream, to tear their lies apart, but Tommy's hand on my shoulder grounded me. "You're not the villain here, Henry," he said, his voice rough but steady. "James knew it. We know it." Ellen, her eyes red from holding back tears, pulled me aside. "I found another nurse's log," she said, her voice shaking. Cassie tried bribing a hospital aide to forge a document saying James was incoherent when he signed the will. The revelation was a blade, cutting through the fog of doubt. She hadn't just lied, she'd tried to corrupt the very people who'd cared for James, turning his suffering into a weapon. My hands shook, not with fear but with a fury so raw it felt like it could burn the battery to ash. Maggie, sensing the shift, opened her laptop and played the flash drive's recording for us. Cassie's voice, cold and calculating, schemed with Danny. "We'll make Whitaker look like a thief, and I'll be the grieving widow. Pay off whoever we need." The room went silent, the truth louder than any megaphone. Outside, Cassie's crowd was growing, her voice still blaring. "Whitaker's a lowlife, stealing from his own flesh and blood." The taunt was a street brawl, crude and vicious, and it lit a fire in me. But another shock hit. Pastor John, his face twisted with self-righteous zeal, joined her, holding up a fake letter from James that claimed he'd wanted Cassie to inherit everything. My heart stopped. John, who'd prayed over James's hospital bed, was now peddling forged documents. The betrayal was a sledgehammer, shattering the trust I'd placed in him, in this community. I felt the weight of every eye on me, neighbors, colleagues, strangers, judging, whispering, believing her lies. Inside, I was fracturing. Had I been too proud, too stubborn to see the town's cracks? Had I failed James by trusting people like John? The grief was a tidal wave, threatening to drown me, but Ellen's voice cut through. "You were there, Henry, not them, you." Maggie's plan was our counterstrike. The Battery event would be a public reckoning. We'd play James's video, show the divorce papers, and release the flash drive's recording. But the final shock came as we set up the stage. A courier dropped off a package from an anonymous source, a photo of Cassie with a notorious local loan shark, dated last week, and a note. She's borrowing millions to fund her smear campaign. My stomach churned. She wasn't just lying. She was sinking into debt to destroy me, betting everything on ruining James's legacy. The betrayal was a living thing, wrapping around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I wanted to give up to let the grief win, but James's voice echoed in my mind. Make it ours. I stood at the edge of the Battery. The harbor's salt air sharpened my lungs, and looked at Maggie, Tommy, and Ellen. Their loyalty was my armor, their belief my weapon. Cassie's crowd was still chanting, Lila's pamphlets littering the ground, John's fake letters circulating. But I wasn't broken. I was Henry Whitaker, a father who'd fought for his son through every hell, and I'd fight for him now. Let's do this, I said, my voice a low growl, steady as the tide. Maggie nodded, her eyes glinting with fire. The event was hours away, and when it came, we'd unleash a truth so sharp it would cut Cassie's lies to ribbons. The war wasn't over, it was just beginning, and I'd be damned if I let her win. The Battery's promenade was alive with the hum of anticipation, the sunset casting long shadows over the harbor as the crowd gathered for the James Whitaker Foundation launch. My heart was a furnace, burning with a mix of resolve and raw betrayal, each lie from Cassie a fresh coal stoking the flames. $100 million James's life's work was at stake, but it was his name, his truth, that I was fighting for. Maggie adjusted the microphone on the stage, her movements precise, while Tommy and Ellen handed out programs, their faces set with a loyalty that kept me anchored. But inside, I was a maelstrom, torn between the father who wanted to honor his son's memory and the warrior facing a town poisoned by Cassie's venom. Her lies, Danny's schemes, Lila's pamphlets, and Pastor John's betrayal had turned Charleston against me, and the weight of it 5 times heavier than any grief I'd known threatened to crush my spirit. As the crowd swelled, locals mixing with reporters and curious onlookers, the first shock hit like a thunderclap. A giant screen behind the stage flickered to life, but instead of our planned video, it showed a hacked feed. Cassie's face, tear-streaked and theatrical, in a pre-recorded rant. Henry Whitaker's a thieving old dog, snatching my husband's fortune while I beg for justice, she sneered, her voice pure Charleston street grit, the kind that echoes in dive bars after last call. The crowd gasped, some booing, others cheering, their voices a chaotic roar that drowned out the harbor's waves. My stomach churned, the betrayal slicing deeper as I realized she'd hijacked our event, turning it into her stage. Maggie cursed under her breath, scrambling to unplug the feed, but the damage was done. Her lies were live, public, and vicious. Are you enjoying the story so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just drop a quick comment below to share how you feel. It only takes a few seconds, but your words give me the motivation and inspiration to make every chapter more thrilling and engaging. Go ahead, let me know what's on your mind. And now, let's dive back into the story. The second shock was a knife to the gut. Lila Brooks, her PR smirk gleaming, stepped onto the stage uninvited, waving a forged document she claimed was James's real will, naming Cassie as the sole heir. Henry's been lying to you all, she shouted, her voice dripping with calculated charm. He forced James to sign away my client's rights. The crowd erupted, some hurling insults at me. Greedy bastard. While others hesitated, their eyes darting between me and Lila. The betrayal wasn't just Cassie's now, it was Lila's, weaponizing her PR skills to twist my son's dying wishes. My hands shook, rage and grief colliding like a hurricane. Had I been too trusting, too focused on James's foundation to see this ambush coming? The doubt was a venom, whispering that I'd failed him, that I'd let his legacy become a spectacle. Then came the third shock. Pastor John, his Bible clutched like a prop, joined Lila on stage, his voice booming with false piety. I knew James, he declared. He told me in private he wanted Cassie to have everything. Henry's a fraud. The words were a sledgehammer, shattering the last of my trust in the community I'd called home. John, who'd blessed James's hospital bed, was now peddling lies for clout or cash, his betrayal a public crucifixion. My chest tightened, the weight of their accusations, thief, manipulator, fraud crushing me. I wanted to scream, to storm the stage and expose their deceit. But my legs felt rooted, my heart torn between fury and a grief so deep it felt like losing James twice. Had I been too proud, too stubborn to see how far this town had fallen? The doubt was a traitor, clawing at my resolve. Tommy's voice broke through, rough and fierce. "Don't let him break you, Henry," he growled, his hand gripping my shoulder. "James is watching." Ellen, tears streaming down her face, handed me a folded note from her pocket, a handwritten letter from James, written months before his death. "Dad, if they come for you, stand tall. You're my rock." The words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. Maggie, her eyes blazing, finally cut the hacked feed and signaled the tech crew to start our video. The screen lit up with James's face, gaunt but resolute, his voice steady as he spoke from his home office. "My father, Henry Whitaker, is the only one who stayed. My ex-wife Cassie left me when I was nothing but pain. This foundation, my fortune, it's his to protect." The crowd fell silent, the truth cutting through Cassie's lies like a blade. But the shocks kept coming. Sarah Tate, her face pale with guilt, pushed through the crowd, clutching a tablet. "Henry, I found this," she whispered, showing me a leaked text chain between Cassie and a local journalist, offering thousands to spin stories against me. The betrayal was a fresh wound Sarah had known about Cassie's media games and stayed silent too long, her neutrality a quiet complicity. My heart ached, not just for her but for the town that had swallowed Cassie's lies so easily. I wanted to give up, to let the grief drown me, but Ellen's voice, soft and fierce, pulled me back. "You're not alone, Henry. We're here because James mattered." Her loyalty, Tommy's grit, Maggie's steel, they were my army, and I wasn't fighting alone. The final shock was the crowd's shift. As James's video ended, a woman in the back, a stranger with weathered hands and tired eyes, stood and shouted, "I knew James. He helped my kid with free coding classes. Henry's telling the truth." Her voice sparked others, murmurs turning to cheers, the tide turning against Cassie. Lila's smirk faltered. Pastor John's Bible slipped, and Cassie's face twisted with rage. "You're all idiots," she screamed, her street venom cracking. "Whitaker's playing you like a damn fiddle." But her words fell flat, the crowd's boos drowning her out. I stepped to the microphone, my cane steady against the stage, my voice low but lethal. "This foundation is my son's heart," I said, my eyes locked on Cassie. "You can't steal what you never earned." The air shifted, charged with a reckoning. Cassie stormed off, her heels clicking furiously, Lila and John trailing behind like scolded dogs. But I wasn't triumphant, my heart was heavy with the cost of this fight. Every lie, every betrayal, Cassie's, John's, Lila's, even Sarah's, had chipped away at the man I thought I was. Yet James's voice, his trust, his legacy burned brighter than their deceit. I looked at Maggie, Tommy, and Ellen, their faces lit with pride, and felt a flicker of peace, not the hollow kind, but the kind earned through fire. The war wasn't over, but tonight, we'd drawn a line in the sand. Cassie's lies were crumbling, and I'd make damn sure they never rose again. The battery's lights faded as Cassie's retreat echoed in my ears, her heels a fading war cry against the cobblestones. The crowd's cheers for James's truth lingered, a fragile victory, but the betrayal, 5 times heavier than any wound I'd ever borne, clung to me like Charleston's swamp fog. My heart was a furnace, burning with pride for my son's legacy and rage at the vultures who'd tried to tear it apart. Maggie, Tommy, and Ellen stood by me, their loyalty a shield, but inside, I was a battlefield. Grief for James clashed with fury at Cassie's lies, Lila's schemes, Pastor John's treachery, and Sarah's wavering silence. $100 million was just the surface. This was about my son's name, his heart, and the town that had turned its back on me. I gripped my cane, my resolve steel, but the weight of their deceit threatened to crack my foundation. Back at Maggie's office, the air was thick with the scent of ink and determination. She spread out a timeline on the desk, mapping out our next moves, press releases, legal filings, and a public archive of James's documents to cement his wishes. But the first shock hit like a lightning bolt. Tommy burst in, his face flushed, holding a local newspaper fresh off the press. The headline screamed, "Whitaker accused of charity fraud." The article, penned by a hack journalist named Vince Malone, claimed I'd siphoned funds from James's foundation for personal gain, citing anonymous sources close to Cassie. My stomach churned, the betrayal a jagged blade. Vince had been a friend, shared beers with me at James's company picnics, and now he was peddling lies for a paycheck. My hands shook, the newspaper crumpling as I fought the urge to storm his office and make him choke on his words. "You're a damn fool if you think you can outrun me, Whitaker." Cassie's voice roared from the street below, her megaphone back in action, her tone pure Charleston gutter venom. "You're a washed-up crook, stealing from your own kid's grave." The crowd outside, smaller now, but still vicious, cheered, their voices a chorus of betrayal that cut deeper than her taunts. The second shock landed like a grenade. Lila Brooks, slinking through the office door uninvited, tossed a USB drive onto the desk with a smirk. "Play it, old man," she sneered. "It's James's confession about how you bullied him into cutting Cassie out." My heart stopped. The video was a fake, a choppy edit of James's voice, his words twisted to sound like he feared me. The betrayal wasn't just Cassie's or Lila's, it was a desecration of my son's voice, a theft of his final truth. My vision blurred, rage and grief colliding like a tidal wave. Had I been too hard on James, too protective in his final days? The doubt was a poison, whispering that I'd pushed him too far, that I'd failed him. The third shock was a sledgehammer. Ellen, her eyes red with fury, pulled out her phone, showing a group chat from hospital staff. "Henry, Cassie paid a nurse to plant that fake video," she said, her voice trembling. "She bribed someone who changed James's Ford bags to lie about his mental state." The revelation was a gut punch. Cassie hadn't just forged lies, she'd corrupted the people who'd kept my son alive. My chest tightened, the betrayal 5 times heavier, as I pictured James, weak and trusting, surrounded by vultures. I wanted to scream, to tear the city apart until every traitor was exposed. But my heart was fracturing. Had I missed her schemes while I was counting his breaths? Had I been so focused on his pain that I'd let her poison his final days? The grief was a weight, crushing me. But Tommy's voice cut through, raw and steady. "You didn't fail him, Henry. She did. We're gonna make this right." Maggie, her eyes blazing, plugged in Lila's USB drive, confirming it was a fraud, timestamps, mismatched, audio spliced. "We've got her," she said, her voice steel. "This goes to the press and the judge." But before we could plan further, another shock hit. Sarah Tate burst in, her face pale, clutching a letter from Pastor John. It was a public apology, claiming he'd been misled by Cassie, but now retracting his support. The twist was a knife John's betrayal had stung, but his flip-flopping cowardice was worse. A weak attempt to save face after selling his soul. My mind spiraled, the town's fickle loyalty a fresh wound. Had I been too trusting, believing Charleston would stand by me? The doubt gnawed, but Ellen's hand on my arm grounded me. "James's truth is stronger than their lies," she said, her voice soft but fierce. The final shock came via a phone call from a local blogger, Mia Chen, a young woman who'd tutored kids through James's programs. "Henry, Cassie's team just sent me a bribe to post a fake story about you laundering money," she said, her voice shaking with disgust. "I've got the emails to prove it." The betrayal was a wildfire. Cassie wasn't just lying. She was buying the city's voice piece by piece. My heart ached, not just for James, but for the community I'd poured my life into, now swayed by her dirty cash. I wanted to give up, to let the grief drown me. But Maggie's voice snapped me back. "We're releasing everything tomorrow," she said. "James's video, the forged will, the bribe emails, all of it. At a press conference. No mercy." The next morning, we gathered at a rented hall on King Street, the air heavy with anticipation. The room was packed reporters, neighbors, even Mia, who'd brought her evidence to share. Cassie stood outside, her megaphone blaring. "Whitaker's a lying sack of shit, robbing me blind." Her street-sharp taunts were desperate now, her crowd thinning. I took the stage, my cane tapping, my voice steady but lethal. "My son built a legacy for this city," I said, my eyes scanning the room. "Cassie Monroe wants to steal it. Here's the truth." Maggie played the real video, James's voice clear and unwavering, followed by the forged clip, the bribe emails, and Mia's testimony. The room went silent, the truth ablade cutting through Cassie's lies. Cassie's face twisted as she stormed out, Lila trailing behind, their defeat palpable. But I wasn't triumphant. My heart was heavy with the cost of this war. Every betrayal, Cassie's schemes, John's flip-flop, Lila's fraud, Vince's article, had chipped away at my faith in this town. Yet Tommy's grin, Ellen's tears, Mia's courage, and Maggie's steel reminded me I wasn't alone. I'd fought for James, for his truth, and I'd won this round. But the fire in my chest told me this wasn't over. Cassie's lies were ashes now, but I'd be ready for whatever she threw next, with $100 million and my son's name on the line. The King Street Hall's silence lingered like the hush after a storm, the weight of James's truth still hanging in the air, as Cassie's retreat left a bitter echo. My chest burned with a fragile victory, but the betrayal 5 times heavier than any scar I'd carried gnawed at my soul like a low-country mosquito swarm. $100 million, James's legacy, was safe for now, but the cost was a town divided, its heart poisoned by lies. Maggie's eyes glinted with resolve as she packed up the evidence. Tommy's grin was a quiet defiance, Ellen's tears a testament to her loyalty, and Mia's courage a spark of hope. Yet inside, I was a battlefield, torn between pride for my son and a grief so raw it felt like his death all over again. Cassie's lies, Lila's schemes, Pastor John's flip-flopping, and Vince's sellout article had turned Charleston streets into a war zone, and I was bleeding from wounds I couldn't name. The next morning, the air was thick with the scent of salt and betrayal as I sat on my porch, sipping black coffee, the harbor's horizon a faint promise of peace. But the first shock hit like a shotgun blast. My phone buzzed with a notification from a local gossip blog, its headline screaming, "Whitaker's dark past exposed." The post, penned by an anonymous source, claimed I'd run shady real estate deals in the 90s, bribing officials to secure James's startup funding. My heart sank. The betrayal, a jagged knife. The source wasn't anonymous. It was Danny Hargrove, his fingerprints all over the slimy prose, twisting my decades of hard work into a criminal caricature. My hands shook, the coffee mug nearly slipping. Had I been too ruthless in my youth, cutting corners to build our empire? The doubt was a venom, whispering that Cassie's lies were finding fertile ground because of my own flaws. "You're a pathetic old has-been, Whitaker." Cassie's voice screeched from a car idling across the street, her face twisted in a street-sharp snarl. "Keep hiding behind your dead kid's money, you slimy bastard." Her taunts, raw as a Charleston bar fight, drew curious neighbors to their windows, their eyes judging me from behind lace curtains. The second shock was a gut punch. Lila Brooks, trailing Cassie like a shadow, posted a video online, a doctored clip of me from a decades-old interview, edited to make me sound like I'd boasted about screwing over partners. The betrayal was a wildfire. Lila wasn't just spinning lies. She was rewriting my life to prop up Cassie's narrative. My chest tightened, rage and grief colliding like a hurricane. Had I been too proud, too blind to see how my past could be weaponized? The doubt was a traitor, clawing at my resolve, whispering that I'd handed Cassie the ammunition to destroy me. The third shock came like a thunderclap. Sarah Tate, her face flushed with panic, knocked on my door, clutching a stack of emails. "Henry, I found these in Vince's office," she stammered. "He's been working with Cassie and Danny to plant stories about you for months. The emails detailed payments, deadlines, even a plan to leak forged bank records, tying me to offshore accounts. The betrayal wasn't just Vince's, it was Sarah's for knowing and staying silent. Her neutrality a quiet stab in the back. My vision blurred, the weight of their deceit 5 times heavier than any loss threatening to crush me. I wanted to scream, to burn the city down until every liar was exposed, but my heart was fracturing. Had I been so focused on James's legacy that I'd missed the snakes circling? Had I failed him by trusting this town? The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in memories of James's hospital bed, his weak hand squeezing mine, his trust in me unwavering. Tommy's truck roared up, his face red with fury. "Henry, we're not letting these bastards win," he growled, tossing a wrench onto my porch table. "I got a buddy who saw Cassie meeting with a forger last night. His loyalty was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge." Ellen arrived, her eyes blazing, holding a USB drive. "This is from James's old assistant," she said, her voice trembling. "Emails from Cassie begging for money years ago, promising to disappear if he paid her off. The revelation was a blade. Cassie hadn't just abandoned James. She'd extorted him, using his pain for profit." My hands clenched, rage burning hotter than ever. Maggie, ever the strategist, was already on the phone with Mia, coordinating a press release to counter the blog post. "We're hitting back tonight," she said, her voice steel. Every lie, every email, every forged clip out in the open. But another shock hit. A courier dropped off a package at my doorstep, unmarked but heavy with menace. Inside was a photo of me and James at a charity gala with a note in red ink. "You're next, Whitaker. Keep the money, lose your name." The handwriting was Danny's, his threat, a chilling escalation. My heart pounded, the betrayal a living thing, wrapping around my throat. Was this what James had feared? Had I exposed him to this venom by fighting for his truth? The doubt was a poison, but Mia's voice broke through, soft but fierce, as she arrived with more evidence. "Henry, I found bank records. Cassie's been funneling money to offshore accounts, not yours." Her courage, a young woman risking her reputation for James's memory, was a spark in the dark. The final shock came as we prepared for the evening press conference. Pastor John, his face haggard, sent a text to Maggie, begging for a meeting. "I was wrong," it read. "Cassie paid me to lie. I'm ready to confess. His betrayal had stung, but this groveling turnaround was worse, a coward trying to save his skin after selling his soul. My chest ached, not just for James, but for the community I'd believed in, now fractured by greed and lies. I stood on my porch, the harbor's salt air sharp in my lungs, and looked at Maggie, Tommy, Ellen, and Mia. Their loyalty was my armor, their belief my weapon. "Let's end this," I said, my voice low but lethal. "No more games." At the press conference, held in a packed community center, I took the stage, my cane steady, my heart heavy but resolute. Maggie played the emails, the bank records, James's assistant's testimony. The crowd was silent, the truth a guillotine slicing through Cassie's lies. Outside, her megaphone was quiet, her crowd gone. But I wasn't triumphant. Every betrayal, from Danny's threats to John's cowardice, had scarred me deeper than I'd admit. Yet, James's trust, his legacy, burned brighter than their venom. I'd fight on, for him, for the truth, with $100 million and his name on the line. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as the crowd dispersed, their silence a testament to the truth we'd unleashed. James's words, the forged emails, the damning bank records. My victory felt hollow, though, the weight of betrayal 5 times heavier than any grief I'd known clinging to me like Charleston's summer heat. $100 million, James's legacy, was secure for now, but the cost was a fractured town, its heart poisoned by Cassie's lies, Danny's schemes, Lila's manipulations, and Pastor John's cowardice. Maggie packed up her laptop, her jaw tight with resolve, while Tommy's quiet nod and Ellen's tear-streaked face anchored me. Mia, her young eyes fierce with conviction, handed me a stack of supportive letters from James's former students. Yet inside, I was a storm, torn between pride for my son and a grief so deep it felt like his coffin was lowering all over again. The fight wasn't over, Cassie's venom was still spreading, and I braced for the next blow. The morning sun barely pierced the fog as I sat in my study, the harbor's salt air seeping through the window. My hands trembled around a photo of James, taken at a low-country shrimp boil, his smile bright despite the chemo scars. Then came the first shock, a gut punch delivered by my phone's shrill ring. It was Mia, her voice shaking. "Henry, Cassie's on live television right now, claiming you threatened her life." My heart stopped. The local news channel showed Cassie, mascara streaked, sobbing theatrically on a morning talk show. "Whitaker's a violent old thug," she snarled, her voice pure Charleston street grit, the kind you'd hear in a back alley brawl. "He's trying to scare me off his stolen fortune, but I ain't backing down." The betrayal was a blade, twisting deeper as the host nodded sympathetically, the audience gasping. My chest tightened, rage and disbelief colliding. Had I been too fierce, too unyielding in this fight? The doubt was a poison, whispering that my strength had painted me as the monster she wanted. The second shock hit like a freight train. Tommy burst through my door, his face red with fury, clutching a flyer circulating at local churches. It was a forged letter, supposedly from me, confessing to pressuring James into changing his will. The signature was a clumsy imitation, but the letterhead bore the logo of my old real estate firm, making it look real enough to fool the faithful. My stomach churned, the betrayal 5 times heavier as I realized Pastor John was behind it, his name stamped as the witness to my confession. John, who'd begged for forgiveness yesterday, had doubled down, selling his soul again for Cassie's cash or clout. My hands shook, the flyer crumpling as I fought the urge to storm his church and make him choke on his lies. Had I trusted too blindly, believing his apology was real? The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in memories of James's trust, his hand in mine as he whispered, "You're enough, Dad." The third shock was a sledgehammer. Ellen arrived, her eyes hollow, holding a tablet with a leaked audio clip. "Henry, this is from Lila," she said, her voice breaking. The clip was a manipulated recording of me, spliced from old voicemails, making it sound like I'd bragged about taking Cassie out if she crossed me. The betrayal wasn't just Lila's, it was the tech crew we'd hired for the battery event, who'd sold my private messages to her for a quick buck. My vision blurred, rage and grief colliding like a low-country storm. I wanted to scream, to tear their lies apart, but my heart was fracturing. Had I been too open, sharing too much with those I thought were allies? The doubt was a traitor, clawing at my resolve, whispering that I'd exposed James's legacy to this venom by fighting too hard. Maggie's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "They're desperate, Henry. This is their last gasp." She was already drafting a legal response, her fingers flying over her laptop. Tommy slammed his fist on the table. "Let's drag him through the mud," he growled, his loyalty a fire that warmed my battered soul. Ellen, wiping tears, handed me a note from James's old lawyer, found in his files. Henry, if Cassie tries anything, use my deposition. She blackmailed me to stay silent. The revelation was a lightning bolt. Cassie hadn't just lied. She'd coerced James's own counsel, twisting his legal protections into her weapon. My chest ached, not just for the betrayal, but for the boy I'd raised, who'd trusted me to guard his dreams. Another shock hit as we planned our counterstrike. Sarah Tate, her face pale with guilt, slipped into the room, clutching a burner phone. Henry, I found this in Vince's car, she whispered. He's been texting Danny, planning to leak fake tax records, tying you to fraud. The betrayal was a wildfire. Sarah had known Vince was dirty and stayed silent, her indecision a quiet stab in the back. My heart pounded, the weight of their deceit threatening to crush me. I wanted to give up, to let the grief drown me. But Mia's voice, soft but fierce, broke through. Henry, I've got contacts at the station. We can demand airtime to set this right. Her courage, a young woman risking her future for James's truth, was a spark in the dark. The final shock came via a knock at my door. A stranger, a grizzled man named Ray Carter, a retired cop who'd mentored James in high school, handed me a dossier. Found this in Danny's office, he said, his voice gruff. He's been funneling Cassie's bribe money through a shell company. The dossier detailed payments, dates, even a plan to frame me for tax evasion. My hands shook, the betrayal a living thing, wrapping around my throat. Cassie's lies, John's forgery, Lila's audio, Vince's texts, Danny's schemes, they were a noose, tightening with every move. But Ray's loyalty, Tommy's fire, Ellen's tears, Mia's defiance, and Maggie's steel were my armor. I stood, my cane tapping the floor, my voice low but lethal. We're going on air tonight, I said. Every lie, every traitor exposed. At the television station, the studio lights burned hot as I faced the cameras, Maggie at my side, the dossier and James's note in hand. Cassie's voice echoed outside, her megaphone weak but vicious. Whitaker's a deadbeat crook, running from the truth. But the crowd was silent, her lies fading. I spoke, my voice steady, laying out the dossier, the deposition, the forged letter. The truth was a guillotine, slicing through their venom. Cassie's face fell, her allies scattering. But I wasn't triumphant, my heart was heavy with the cost of this war. Every betrayal had scarred me, yet James's trust burned brighter. I'd fight on for him, for $100 million, for the truth that would never bow. The television studio's lights dimmed as the cameras cut, but the echo of my words, James's truth, laid bare, hung heavy in the air, a blade that had sliced through Cassie's lies. My heart was a furnace, burning with a fragile triumph, yet the betrayal 5 times heavier than any wound I'd ever carried, clung to me like Charleston's marsh mud. $100 million, James's legacy, stood firm, but the cost was a town fractured by deceit, its soul scarred by Cassie's venom, Danny's greed, Lila's schemes, Vince's sellout, and Pastor John's cowardice. Maggie's steady hand on my shoulder, Tommy's fierce nod, Ellen's tearful resolve, Mia's defiant courage, and Ray's gruff loyalty were my anchors. But inside, I was a maelstrom. Grief for James battled a rage, so raw it felt like my chest might split, and the doubt, had I fought too hard, pushed too far, gnawed at my soul like a low-country gator. The morning after the broadcast, I sat in my kitchen, the scent of chicory coffee grounding me as I stared at a photo of James, his eyes bright from a day fishing on Folly Beach. The first shock hit like a shotgun blast. My phone buzzed with a viral video from Cassie, posted on a local gossip site. She stood in a dimly lit bar, her voice slurring with Charleston street venom. Whitaker's a filthy old snake, stealing my man's cash while I'm out here broke as hell. She spat, her words raw as a dockside brawl. The video showed her holding a forged bank statement, claiming I'd hidden millions in secret accounts. The crowd in the comments cheered her on, calling me a thieving geezer, their betrayal a fresh wound that cut deeper than her taunts. My hands trembled, the phone nearly slipping. Had I been too blind, too trusting of this town's heart? The doubt was a poison, whispering that my fight had turned me into the villain she painted. The second shock was a sledgehammer. Ellen burst through my door, her face pale, clutching a letter slipped under her clinic's door. It was from Vince Malone, the journalist, now claiming he'd been coerced by Danny to write the fraud article, but adding a new lie, that I'd threatened his family to keep him quiet. The betrayal was a knife, twisting as I realized Vince wasn't just a sellout, he was doubling down, spinning a new narrative to save his skin while smearing mine. My chest tightened, rage and grief colliding like a storm surge. Had I been too harsh, driving allies like Vince to betrayal? The doubt was a traitor, clawing at my resolve, whispering that my strength had pushed everyone away. I wanted to scream, to confront Vince and make him choke on his lies, but Ellen's voice, soft but fierce, cut through. Henry, you're not the monster here. James knew it. We know it. The third shock came like a thunderclap. Tommy stormed in, his boots muddy, holding a tablet with a leaked email from Lila to a city official. Henry, she's trying to revoke the Foundation's permits, he growled, his voice thick with fury. The email claimed I'd falsified documents to secure city funding, a lie so bold it could have sunk James's dream overnight. The betrayal wasn't just Lila's, it was the official, a woman named Carla Vance, who'd dined at my table years ago, now silently complicit in Lila's scheme. My vision blurred, the weight of their deceit 5 times heavier than any loss threatening to crush me. I pictured James, sketching foundation plans on a hospital napkin, his voice weak but clear. Dad, make it last. Had I failed him by trusting people like Carla? The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in memories of his trust, his hope, his fight. Maggie's voice snapped me back, sharp as a whip. They're cornered, Henry. This is their death rattle. She was already drafting a legal injunction to block Lila's permit stunt, her fingers flying over her laptop. Mia arrived, her eyes blazing, holding a stack of affidavits from James's former employees. They're ready to testify, she said, her voice trembling with conviction. Cassie tried bribing them to lie about your finances. The revelation was a blade. Cassie hadn't just lied. She'd targeted the people James had mentored, twisting their loyalty into her weapon. My hands clenched, rage burning hotter than ever. But another shock hit. Ray Carter, the retired cop, called with a bombshell. Henry, I got a tip Danny's been meeting with a hacker to plant fake evidence on your company's servers. The betrayal was a wildfire. Danny wasn't just scheming. He was orchestrating a digital assault to frame me for crimes I'd never committed. The final shock came as we prepared for a public response. Sarah Tate, her face haggard, slipped me a note at the Foundation office. Henry, I found this in Carla's files, she whispered, handing me a contract showing Cassie had promised Carla a cut of the $100 million for her silence. The betrayal was a noose. Sarah's delay in sharing this, her wavering loyalty, was another quiet stab. My heart pounded, the weight of their deceit threatening to break me. I wanted to give up to let the grief drown me, but Tommy's voice, rough and steady, grounded me. We're tougher than their lies, Henry. James built this foundation, and we're keeping it standing. Ellen's tears, Mia's defiance, Ray's grit, and Maggie's steel were my army. Their loyalty a shield against the vultures. I stood in the Foundation office, the harbor's lights flickering through the window, and felt a resolve harden like Charleston's ancient oaks. We go public again, I said, my voice low but lethal. Every affidavit, every email, every lie out in the open. Maggie nodded, her eyes glinting with fire. We planned a town hall at the old Gaillard Center, a stage to bury Cassie's lies once and for all. Outside, her voice echoed faintly, her megaphone weak. Whitaker's a crooked old fool, robbing me blind. But the crowd was gone, her lies fading like smoke. At the town hall, I faced the packed room, my cane steady, my heart heavy but resolute. Maggie presented the affidavits, Ray's tip, Carla's contract. The truth was a guillotine, slicing through their venom. Cassie's allies scattered, their faces pale, but I wasn't triumphant. Every betrayal, Danny's hacking, Carla's greed, Vince's lies, Lila's schemes had scarred me deeper than I'd admit. Yet James's trust, his legacy, burned brighter. I'd fight on, for him, for $100 million, for the truth that would never bend. The Gaillard Center's stage lights dimmed, leaving a heavy silence in their wake, the truth of James's legacy ringing out like a low-country church bell. Cassie's lies lay in tatters, her allies scattered, but the betrayal 5 times heavier than any wound I'd ever borne clung to my bones like Charleston's marsh fog. $100 million, my son's heart and soul, was safe. But the cost was a town fractured by deceit, its spirit scarred by Danny's greed, Lila's schemes, Vince's treachery, Carla's complicity, and Pastor John's cowardice. Maggie's steady gaze, Tommy's fierce loyalty, Ellen's tearful resolve, Mia's defiant courage, and Ray's gruff honor were my anchors. But inside, I was a hurricane. Grief for James battled a rage so raw it threatened to consume me. And the doubt, had I pushed too hard, alienated too many, gnawed at my soul like a riptide pulling me under. The next evening, I sat alone on my porch, the harbor's salt air sharp against the fading light, a glass of bourbon untouched in my hand. The first shock hit like a thunderbolt. A handwritten letter slid under my door, no return address, but the scrawl was unmistakably Cassie's. "You think you've won, you miserable old bastard," it read, her words dripping with street venom, the kind you'd hear in a Charleston dive bar at midnight. "I'll burn your whole world down before I let you keep my money." The threat was a blade, slicing through the fragile piece I'd clung to. My heart pounded, the betrayal 5 times heavier as I realized she wasn't just fighting for money, she was waging a vendetta to destroy me. Had I underestimated her desperation, her hatred? The doubt was a poison, whispering that my fight had turned me into the villain she needed. The second shock was a gut punch. Tommy burst through my gate, his face red with fury, clutching a grainy photo from a local bar's security camera. It showed Cassie meeting with a known conman, Frankie Slick Russo, a low-country lowlife who'd once tried to scam James's startup. The photo captured them exchanging a briefcase, likely stuffed with cash or forged documents. The betrayal wasn't just Cassie's, it was Frankie's. A man I'd once bailed out of jail for James's sake, now siding with her to ruin me. My hands shook, the photo crumpling as I fought the urge to hunt them down and make them pay. Had I been too soft, too trusting of men like Frankie? The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in memories of James's trust, his voice weak but clear. "Dad, you always see the good in people. Don't let them use it." The third shock came like a lightning strike. Ellen called, her voice trembling, with news from the hospital grapevine. "Henry, Cassie tried to hack into James's medical records last night," she said, her words breaking with rage. She paid a tech to plant notes saying he was delusional when he signed the will. The betrayal was a sledgehammer. Cassie wasn't just lying. She was desecrating the very records of James's final days, twisting his pain into her weapon. My chest tightened, rage and grief colliding like a storm surge. I wanted to scream, to tear her apart for violating my son's memory, but my heart was fracturing. Had I been too focused on the legal fight, missing her digital schemes? The doubt was a traitor, clawing at my resolve, whispering that I'd failed James by not protecting every piece of him. Maggie's truck roared up, her face set with determination. "We've got a hearing tomorrow," she said, tossing a legal brief onto my porch table. "The judge is reviewing Cassie's latest motion to contest the will, claiming coercion." Her voice was steel, but the fourth shock hit before I could respond. Ray Carter arrived, his cop's eyes hard, holding a burner phone. "Found this in Frankie's car," he said, playing a voicemail from Lila to Cassie. "We've got a whistleblower. Some nurse who'll swear Henry threatened James in the hospital. Push harder." The betrayal was a wildfire. Lila wasn't just spinning lies. She was fabricating witnesses, corrupting the very people who'd cared for my son. My vision blurred, the weight of their deceit threatening to crush me. I pictured James, his frail hand in mine, trusting me to guard his legacy. Had I let him down by not seeing this coming? The fifth shock was a grenade. Mia burst in, her face pale, clutching a tablet with a leaked text from Vince to a local councilman. "Henry, Vince is claiming you bribed him to stay quiet about your tax evasion," she said, her voice shaking with disgust. The lie was a knife, twisting as I realized Vince wasn't just a sellout, he was framing me as a criminal mastermind to save his own skin. My heart pounded, the betrayal 5 times heavier, as I faced the reality that Charleston's trust was slipping away. I wanted to give up, to let the grief drown me. But Tommy's voice, rough and fierce, cut through. "They're liars, Henry, but you're tougher than this." James knew it. Ellen's tears, Mia's defiance, Ray's grit, and Maggie's steel were my army, their loyalty a shield against the vultures. The final shock came as I opened my mailbox, finding a crumpled note from Sarah Tate. "Henry, I'm sorry," it read. Cassie paid me to keep quiet about her meeting with Frankie. I was scared. Her betrayal, softer but no less painful, was a quiet stab. Her silence had fueled this war. My chest ached, not just for James, but for the community I'd believed in, now fractured by fear and greed. I stood, my cane tapping the porch, my voice low but lethal. "We end this at the hearing," I said. Maggie nodded, her eyes blazing. At the courthouse, I faced the judge, presenting Ray's voicemail, Mia's texts, Ellen's hospital logs. Cassie's voice echoed outside, weak but vicious. "Whitaker's a dirty old crook, stealing my life." But the judge's gavel fell, dismissing her motion. The truth was a guillotine, slicing through her lies. I wasn't triumphant, every betrayal had scarred me, but James's trust burned brighter. I'd fight on, for him, for $100 million, for the truth that would never break. The courthouse gavel's echo faded, leaving a silence as heavy as Charleston's marsh fog. The judge's dismissal of Cassie's motion, a final blade through her lies. My heart was a battlefield, scarred by a betrayal 5 times heavier than any I'd known, yet lit by the faint glow of James's truth. $100 million, my son's legacy, stood unyielding, but the cost was a town fractured by greed, Cassie's venom, Danny's schemes, Lila's manipulations, Vince's treachery, Carla's complicity, and Pastor John's cowardice had left wounds that bled deep. Maggie's steady hand, Tommy's fierce loyalty, Ellen's tearful resolve, Mia's defiant courage, and Ray's gruff honor were my anchors. But inside, I was a hurricane. Grief and rage colliding like a low-country storm. The doubt had I fought too fiercely, lost too much, gnawed at my soul. But James's trust, his voice, his dream, burned brighter than their deceit. The morning sun rose over the harbor, casting golden streaks across my porch, where I sat with a worn photo of James, his grin bright from a day at Sullivan's Island. The first shock hit like a thunderbolt. A local radio show blared through my neighbor's window, Cassie's voice snarling with street-sharp venom. "Whitaker's a rotten old bastard, hogging my man's fortune while I'm out here scrapping," she spat, her words raw as a Charleston alley brawl. She claimed I'd hired thugs to intimidate her, spinning a tale of late-night threats outside her hotel. The betrayal was a jagged knife, her lies painting me as a mobster to a town already swaying in her favor. My hands trembled, the photo creasing as I fought the urge to storm the station and silence her. Had I been too aggressive, giving her fuel for this narrative? The doubt was a poison, whispering that my fight had turned me into the monster she needed. The second shock was a sledgehammer. Tommy burst through my gate, his face red, clutching a leaked text from Danny to a private investigator. "Henry, they're digging into your old business deals," he growled, claiming you laundered money through James's startup. The betrayal was a wildfire. Danny wasn't just scheming. He'd hired a PI to fabricate a criminal past, twisting my decades of work into a lie. My chest tightened, rage and grief colliding like a tidal wave. I pictured James, sketching his app in a hospital bed, trusting me to protect his dream. Had I been too reckless, leaving gaps for Danny to exploit? The doubt was a traitor, clawing at my resolve, whispering that I'd failed my son by not foreseeing this attack. The third shock came like a grenade. Ellen arrived, her eyes hollow, holding a letter from a hospital colleague. "Henry, Cassie's claiming you bribed doctors to falsify James's mental health records," she said, her voice breaking. The accusation was a desecration, turning the sacred nights I'd spent by James's side into a conspiracy. The betrayal wasn't just Cassie's, it was the colleague, a nurse named Tammy Holt, who'd accepted her cash to lie. My vision blurred, the weight of their deceit 5 times heavier, threatening to crush me. I wanted to scream, to burn their lies to ash, but my heart was fracturing. Had I been too trusting, believing the hospital was a sanctuary? The grief was a riptide pulling me under, but Mia's voice, fierce and young, cut through. "Henry, we've got proof hospital logs showing Tammy's payments." Her courage, a spark in the dark, reminded me I wasn't alone. The fourth shock was a lightning strike. Ray stormed in, his cop's eyes hard, holding a flash drive. "Found this in Carla's office," he said. "It's a recording of her and Lila planning to bribe a judge to reopen the will case." The betrayal was a noose. Carla, who'd smiled at my dinner table, was now conspiring to corrupt the courts. My hands shook, rage burning hotter than ever. But the fifth shock hit harder. Sarah Tate, her face pale, slipped me a note. "Henry, Vince confessed to me he planted fake evidence in your company files for Cassie. The betrayal was a blade, Vince's treachery, a final twist, framing me as a criminal to save his own skin." My heart pounded, the doubt of venom whispering that I'd failed James by trusting too many. But Tommy's growl, Ellen's tears, Mia's defiance, Ray's grit, and Maggie's steel were my army, their loyalty a shield. The final shock came at dusk, as I walked the battery alone, the harbor's waves a quiet rhythm. Cassie appeared, her face haggard, no megaphone, just raw desperation. "You've ruined me, you miserable old prick," she hissed, her voice a broken Charleston street snarl. I just wanted my piece of him. Her eyes, hollow with defeat, met mine, and for a moment, I saw not a villain but a woman chasing a ghost. The betrayal was a weight, but I felt no triumph, only a grief so deep it felt like losing James again. "You lost him when you left," I said, my voice low but steady. "This was never yours." She flinched, dropping a crumpled letter, her plea for mercy. Unread and walked away, swallowed by the twilight. I returned home, the harbor's lights flickering, and sat with Maggie, who poured bourbon in silence. The truth had won, but the cost was a town scarred, my faith in it shattered. Yet James's legacy, the foundation, his dream stood unbroken. The knowledge of his trust, the education he'd wanted for others, the lesson of standing firm were my strength. This knowledge taught me that betrayal doesn't define you. Your response does. The education of this fight showed me the power of truth, the lesson that loyalty outlasts lies. The knowledge of James's heart, the education of his vision, the lesson of his courage. These were my legacy too. I learned the knowledge of resilience, the education of forgiveness, the lesson of letting go, not for Cassie, but for myself. This story, born from Charleston's heart, holds a lesson for us all. Truth is a fire that burns through lies, and real love endures. What did you feel watching this? Does it echo your own battles, your own betrayals? Share your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe to Revenge X on YouTube for more stories that grip your soul. Your comments, your hearts, fuel this journey. How does this tale of knowledge and education resonate with your life? I wish you all health, a vibrant life, joy every day, and peace in your soul. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay strong, stay true, and keep your health shining.